Our experts reacted to William's emotional interview. How plots and conspiracies now dominate a brief cup of tea between the King and Prince. And why Andrew and Fergie could now have to make new plans for Christmas. It's another very busy show coming up for you. Hello and welcome to Palace Confidential. I'm Jo Elvin, and back to react to all the big royal news is the Daily Mail's royal editor, Rebecca English, and the paper's diary editor, Richard Eden. Welcome to you both. A reminder that if you want more great royal shows and expertise, there are two things you can do. One is to make sure that you subscribe to the Daily Mail Royals YouTube channel. Click that subscribe button for free to be notified whenever we put out a new show. And you can subscribe to the Palace Confidential weekly newsletter, which is also full of great royal content and also free. There's a QR code on your screen now, which you can scan using your phone's camera. It's oh so easy. And if you are watching on a phone, we'll put a link to that in the description below. Okay, so we're going to kick things off with Prince William.
Getting the balance of work and family life right is really important, because for me, the most important thing in my life is family, and everything is about the future and about if you don't start the children off now with a happy, healthy, stable home, I feel you're setting them up for a bit of a hard time and a fall. So it's about making sure that we can look after our families and look after our children in a way that we feel is best for their future.
That was William talking to Canadian actor Eugene Levy on his show The Reluctant Traveller, which is coming out on Apple Plus. Rebecca, extraordinary. The importance of family with William was what was important to see there, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was very lucky actually. I've been to a private screening of the whole show earlier on this week for our coverage. And I thought what was amazing was how candid William was about all sorts of subjects, and how we all know how much his family means to him and how much he wants to ring fence his family. But you could really sense the kind of the steeliness about that. And I think that's to be applauded. He makes very clear, quite openly I think, that he doesn't want to repeat the mistakes that his own parents made. You know, they divorced when he was very young. That's clear. That's had a very, very direct effect on him, and that he wants to be a father who's there very present for his children, and to make sure also that they weren't subject to the same media interests that he and Harry were as young boys. And he makes very clear that that is an absolute line in the sand for him. And I think, you know, as I say, we hear this a lot, but having it come from his own lips in what will be such a global vehicle for it, I think was fascinating.
Well, I'm just fascinated. We've come a really long way, haven't we, from the Queen Elizabeth era of never complain, never explain. Well, I think a lot of people like me will be wondering why he did the interview. He didn't have to do it.
No, and when we say interview, it's important to explain that it's not him just sitting down being grilled by a journalist. You know,
Yeah.
Eugene Levy doesn't pretend to be a journalist. He's a very successful, you know, Canadian actor and broadcaster, but he's not a journalist. And the entire episode, it just shows them walking around the castle and on a walk through the grounds, and then sitting down for a pint in the two brewers in Windsor at the end of it. So it's a little kind of nuggets interspersed throughout a kind of wider conversation about monarchy, and it's a great advertisement to go and see Windsor Castle and come to London and,
For sure.
and England generally.
Yeah.
But I think it shows that he's become more comfortable with this mode of telling his story, and it's a story that he wants to take ownership of. But I don't think there's any appetite to sit down and do the big interview. This is quite a kind of clever way of getting his point across,
Yeah.
without having to kind of sit down in the old-fashioned sense and, you know, be grilled one-on-one like this. Yeah.
Oh, I don't grill you guys. Come on.
I liked grilling.
So you sense, Richard, that bringing up the children would have been a bigger deal within the royal family than was obvious.
Yes, I mean, it shouldn't be, you know, underestimated what a big change it was. I mean, my goodness, sometimes on this programme we've talked about what happened after the Queen became monarch. And, you know, when Princess Anne and Prince Charles were very young, she had to leave them for that long, I think it was 6-month tour of the Commonwealth to sort of introduce herself to the various countries.
And it was just seen as so unquestionably normal, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that certainly didn't cause... I mean, imagine now if you did that. There'd be huge questions about what a, you know, bad parent you were and that sort of thing. So it's a reflection of how times have changed. but also how things have changed the royal family. I mean, just the emphasis that William and Catherine have always put on being there for their children, taking them to school, collecting them, that kind of thing, which others is part and parcel. You know, I would take my daughters to school in the morning when they're at primary school, and my wife would collect them and things like that. And that's become quite normal. But in the royal family, that would have definitely been an exception.
That's interesting. Do you think the Queen ever did the school run?
No.
No. I mean, it's
simple as that.
wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
To be fair, she may have, the school run in the sense, she may have dropped them off at the start of the term at a boarding school.
Okay, we'll let her off. Let's see another clip of the show now.
Yeah. Are you optimistic?
I am optimistic. I'm generally a very optimistic person, especially when I'm with someone like you, Eugene. You know, life is sent to test us as well, and it definitely can be challenging at times. And being able to overcome that is what makes us who we are. I'm so proud of my wife and my father for how they've handled all of last year. My children have managed brilliantly as well.
Well, I'm hoping every other prince I run into is as nice, open, and human as you.
Rebecca, he's talking about the family's resilience, and we've really seen a different, sort of like stronger side to William there, haven't we?
We have. I mean, he talks about how proud he feels of the King and Catherine, about how they've handled such a difficult year. I tell you what, I was taken really aback by, and I see him a lot at first hand in the course of my day-to-day work, but I also think he came across as actually very vulnerable in this, and I think we actually get a glimpse of really the effect the last year has had on him, and he describes it as the most terrible year of his life. He's previously described it to us as the most brutal year of his life. And yes, you're right, there's a resilience, and I think it has also strengthened his resolve to lead his family life in the way that he wants to. Because I think, like anybody who has seen, even fleetingly, the chance of that being snatched away from him, it makes you realise where your priorities lie. But I do think he comes across as quite sad and quite vulnerable in it as well. And I think people will feel really quite moved by that when they see it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, Richard? He does talk about how impressed he's been with, his children and his wife and his father really facing the challenges that they've had. But he must have faced them and come out stronger as well. Yeah,
I mean, because we haven't obviously heard that much about the children. I mean, you might remember that they decided to not tell the children about Catherine's diagnosis until it was the holidays, actually, because they didn't want the news to come out and them to hear at school.
Yeah.
So then they went to Norfolk for a holiday to sort of digest the big news. But we haven't heard any more about how the children have reacted. But clearly from this, William is pleased with the way the family have responded, and they've tried to see it as a positive thing that they've learnt from and strengthened. I mean, I think all of us, when you're tested in that way, hopefully you come out stronger.
And you have to reap the positives from it. And there wasn't a lot, but there was more positive news about Catherine's health, wasn't there? And now, obviously, some of this stuff we knew about already, but it's kind of, I think it will reassure a lot of people to hear it from William's mouth, don't you think?
Yeah, so when they're in the pub, Eugene Levy, and he asks it carefully because he doesn't want to be, too overbearing. He says, look, I hear it's good news that your wife's in remission. And William says, yes, it's great news. And he chooses his words carefully. He says things are moving in the right direction. And I think that is because, like anybody who's been through the whole cancer experience knows that, you can never say with confidence, I am cancer-free, not for a very, very long period of time afterwards.
And you don't want to tempt fate, do
No,
you?
exactly.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of twists and turns. So I think it is incredibly positive, and he re-emphasises what she herself says, that she's really in a good place physically and mentally and medically now. But I think he doesn't want to sound overly enthusiastic because, of course, it is a constant journey. And also I suspect there's an element, if he doesn't want to, compare the happy news that he and Catherine have received, when other people may not be receiving such happy news. And I think that's something he's always quite conscious of.
Such a tricky line to tread when you're a public figure, isn't it?
Because you are happy for yourselves, but you appreciate, because he's the president of the Royal Marsden. He hears the stories of people who sadly haven't been so lucky. So I suspect, you know, it is good news, but the reason why you're not seeing him doing cartwheels around the pub is because, you know, it's always a long process, and he's very conscious that other people may not be going through the same experience that they are.
I should say, I was at an event for the Royal Marsden charity last Friday, and there was a lady who spoke to us who had met Catherine, and she'd had breast cancer herself, and she talked about how inspired she had been, and others who'd met her had felt. So they were really pleased that Catherine has now become joint patron with William, and her emphasis on nature to help recovery and stuff has genuinely helped others. So, you know, there is a positive to come out of this.
That's brilliant.
That's really good to hear.
Rebecca, William also sounded emotional talking about the Queen, his late grandmother, didn't he?
Yeah, he sounded really wistful when he was talking about her. And he goes into the King's Room in Windsor Castle, and they're looking out over the incredible scenery of the Berkshire countryside. And he said, actually, the reason why I wanted you here is because it meant so much to my late grandmother, and, you know, I want to give you the kind of tour that she would have wanted to give you, you know. And he actually says, you know, for me, Windsor is her. And I think it emphasises William's and Catherine's decision to move their family to Windsor out of London, and not only do that, but now move to Forest Lodge and make it very clear that this will be their forever home, their family life. And you can see how much that estate now is really intrinsically tied up with him. And, you know, he says, like, it was very sweet. He talks about kind of coming home from Eton, escaping from Eton when he could, which is only kind of just over the river, and he said, oh, she did the best teas, my granny, you know, and I was always really well fed, and I can imagine as a child escaping boarding school, you know, and going with these wonderful teas. And he said we'd talk about everything. She wanted to know about my life, about family stuff. We talk a bit about work, but she just wanted to know what was going on with him. And he also talks about Prince Philip and his sense of humour and how it wasn't always intentional, but you know, what a wag he was. And he makes clear he really misses them both. And you can, you know, he says there's been a lot of change over the years, and that's really something he's had to incorporate as well. I always say, you know, when a member of the royal family loses someone, you know, they're having to grieve very publicly, but it also means there's huge change going on in their lives. You know, when his grandmother died, it meant that his journey towards the throne was one step closer as well, which has big ramifications on his family. But I think you get a sense in this programme of just how special their relationship was.
It's lovely. And there was, I love this, there was some fun insight, wasn't there, into what he gets up to in Windsor Castle when all the tourists have gone home.
This was lovely, actually. He talks about how they were in the Great Hall, which is where we saw President Trump's state banquet the other day, so people might be able to visualise it quite well. And it's got all these big carpets down it, and he's saying that when him and his cousins used to go and play there, the carpets weren't there, and they used to get massive splinters in their knees because the floor was very old and a bit rickety. But he actually said that they'll often, him and his children, George, Charlotte and Louis, they'll come in after hours, after this part of the castle is closed to paying members of the public, and they'll chase each other around. But he you know...
must be great for hide and seek, can you imagine?
Yeah, hiding in
you could get lost forever.
Yeah. And he just said, but he doesn't think his children appreciate how lucky they are to have those rugs to run around on instead of getting the splinters that him and Zara and Peter used to get.
So how do you think he did overall? How do you think people will judge this, what you call not really an interview, but it is an interview?
Well, sometimes those are the best interviews, aren't they? Because you're getting things out of people when they're very relaxed. I thought it was very good. I didn't know what I was going to see when I saw the whole thing. And I went into it with quite an open mind, especially as a journalist. You're looking at it and analysing it.
And jealously, a little bit, let's be honest.
I think the next stage surely has got to be for Prince William to join us here on Palace Confidential.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold your breath, Richard, but the invitation is always there, Your Highness.
But as I said, it's I think he comes across as really very open and quite vulnerable. You see a fun side to him. There's a great scene when Eugene Levy's waiting for him to arrive, and he genuinely didn't know this was going to happen, apparently, because the Apple TV people told me. And suddenly William comes round up the long walk into the quadrangle at Windsor Castle on this electric scooter, in his, you know, suited and booted, and comes round, and, you know, Levy properly laughed and said, now that I definitely didn't expect. And William was like, well, it's a great way to get around the estate for me most of the time. It's kind of quick and easy and simple. So you can see some quite fun sides to him as well. You see all of his dog quite a lot, and you can see that dog. And I said to one of the staff, I said, that dog is clearly like a a daddy's girl. And they went, oh yeah, it's like she definitely is.
Yeah.
So you get a kind of, a glimpse into his life in a really unusual way, in a way we don't see him before. So I think it's going to do very, very well.
Indeed. And I mean, obviously, Richard, royal interviews have a bit of a checkered history, to put it mildly. But how do you think the sort of like the consensus seems to be that he's done pretty well in this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing the whole thing. I've only seen clips so far. But as you say, interviews generally can be a disaster. We think of his uncle, Prince Andrew, and the Emily Maitlis. But this was very much not off that school. This is light entertainment, essentially. So I look forward to seeing how it's is seen by people. I mean, what's interesting is it's Apple TV, so William clearly wants it to be seen around the world, and we know he very much does have a global profile now with Earthshot. We're going to see that in Brazil soon. So I think that's a really interesting sign of how he wants to make an impression globally.
Yeah, and one of the probably most fascinating bits, Rebecca, and what some might see as controversial, is he was talking about how he might change things when he's king.
I want to create a world in which my son is proud of what we do, in a world and a job that actually does impact people's lives for the better. That is caveated with, I hope we don't go back to some of the practices in the past that Harry and I had to grow up in, and I will do everything I can to make sure we don't regress in that situation.
It sounds like the monarchy will be shifting in a slightly different direction.
I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change. I don't fear it. That's the bit that excites me, is the idea of being able to bring some change. Not overly radical change, but changes that I think need to happen.
Yeah, he was very, again, I would even go so far as to use the word quite steely on this and said, I am not afraid to embrace change. I love tradition. I think tradition is really important. He's effectively saying all the things you love about the monarchy will still be there when I become king, but equally, I'm quite willing to say, is this still relevant? Do we still need this? Is this still fit for purpose? Is what he says, and I will embrace change if it needs to be done. And he also kind of acknowledges that when he was younger, this is me paraphrasing what he's saying, that he wasn't always overly enthusiastic about the idea of becoming king. It's taken him quite a long while to get his head around it, but now he can see the monarchy as a continuing force for good in this country. He wants his son, Prince George, to be proud of the fact that he is part of this incredible institution. But he said also, institutions also need to move with the times, and I am not afraid to take, decisions that people have an opinion on one way or another when that time comes.
Well, please tell me he's not going to get rid of the feathers and the plumes
I
of
bet
the
that's first on the
Order
list.
of the Garter.
Yeah.
No, because we...
Well, we need it. We need our royals to look royal, don't we?
We need that teasing from Catherine when he's wearing it.
100%. But, I mean, in seriousness, whatever he gets right about these changes, this is a tricky road to navigate, no matter what you do, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, I hope that William understands that change is not what the monarchy is about. What the monarchy is about is continuity. But like, everyone wants to change some things, and he's come in, quite recently and is in charge of the Duchy of Cornwall. And we've seen how he's been doing things a bit differently there. He's been emphasising home building. I would say it's a very positive example, because he's been building on what his father achieved. And so often, he might want to talk about change and that sort of thing. That's natural. But when it comes down to it, hopefully he's building on sort of firm foundations.
And I guess younger generations, that's a message that appeals to them, that it would modernise and change.
Well, especially because the housing, I think it's a really good example of Richard to use the Duchy of Cornwall. And someone has said to me, when I asked him about it this week, having watched the programme, he said that is a perfect example. The worst thing you can say to Prince William is, when he says, why do we do it like this? And he's all, and the worst thing to say to him is, well, because we've always done it like that. And that for him is almost a bit of a trigger.
No
and
boss
he's like,
wants to hear
no,
that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we might be changing these things. And, where he's done it with the Duchy of Cornwall, that he's found parcel of lands or disused housing that he's now made sure is more social housing, and that will tie in with his Homewards campaign to help eradicate unnecessary homelessness in this country. So I think people will see it as a force for good. As Richard said, hopefully it will mean the things that appeal to people coming to the UK and appeal to people in this country will stay.
Indeed,
But
yeah.
he'll just, maybe give it a bit of a tweak here and there.
Well, I know that our viewers will have comments about William's potential changes to the royal family, so please do let us know your thoughts. And let's move on to some other comments now. We had lots of lovely messages from viewers in Asia after we discussed Prince Edward and Sophie's trip to Japan. HWH wrote, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh's visit was well received here in Japan. People are fond of the British royal family and loved it when BRF welcomed our Emperor and Empress warmly on their recent visit. Also, thank you for your lovely montage. I remember I admired Princess Di's red polka dot dress as a child. Oh. Well, we were thrilled to hear from so many of you in Japan. Jean, Hiroko Yoshida, Kei Kinomoto, and Raiko Amano, who all left messages. Then there were many of you from Singapore, like Angie, Chong Yon Jin, Tony Quack, Evelyn Wan, and Lynette Lim. And over in Malaysia, we had Marina Tu, Zain, and Saya or Shah Peter, Veronica, and Lavina. And all of you who left us comments from Hong Kong, Indonesia, and the Philippines. But not everyone was happy with this visit. Like Ronnie by the Sea, who says, what do Japan, France, Italy, and the US have in common? They are not members of the Commonwealth. I'm starting to wonder where the British monarchy's loyalties lie. Well, Richard, in fairness, it's not always the royal family's choice where they go, is it?
No, it's a tricky one because often they're visiting places representing the government. We've seen this week Princess Anne was in Ukraine and that was at the request of the British government. So it's a balancing act. I mean, the monarch might say, look, I want to visit, my people in Australia, Canada, but then they may say, well, actually, we're hoping to do some trade deals with India or wherever. So I suspect there's a lot of negotiation that goes on. And whereas the government might take into account the wishes of the monarch and other members of the royal family, in a constitutional monarchy, it is the government that will have the final say.
But of course, the Commonwealth is always important to the royal family.
Yes, I think they know that. The government accepts that.
Yeah.
And there's no question of that. So even if people have to be patient, usually they will get there eventually.
Yeah, hang in there, Aussies, hang in there. Well, lots of you were unhappy with the revelations about Sarah Ferguson and her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Dee said, Andrew and Fergie laugh at the British people, while Mareike, I do hope I'm getting that right, Mareike, thinks William and Catherine are right to not want anything to do with either the Yorks or the Sussexes. The royal family learned from Fergie's shenanigans, hence the limitations. And of course, the insults the Markles vomited up against the royal family. Goodness me. The Walesers are justified in keeping their distance. Keep the toxicity and drama out of your life. That is the best approach. Possibly easier said than done, but thanks for that comment. On the theme of the Yorks and the Sussexes, Annette Trelaw asks, hello from a long-time watcher in Hervey Bay, Queensland. My question is, why does anyone in the royal family want to make money? Presumably they have everything that even a billionaire does. I know technically that it's not theirs, but what's the difference? They have it till they die, the same as everyone else. Puzzles me. If I had to do a few royal engagements a year to have access to everything with no bills, yeah, it's a fair question, Rebecca. Do you, any idea?
It's a very fair question, and it goes back, I think, to the point, and I always make it, they are very privileged people. Nobody could argue that. But I always say that they're much more asset rich than cash rich. People would be surprised. And I think you need to take away the monarch and the Prince of Wales from this. So they have two pots of money each. They'll have, their personal fortunes, but they'll also have, in the King's case, a sovereign grant, which he can only use for the upkeep of royal residences and to fund his work as head of state. In Prince William's case, he gets the Duchy of Cornwall, which is to fund his public work again, but also he can fund his, personal lifestyle as well. But I think you've got to take that away from the other working members of the royal family, who get allowances effectively from the monarch to fund the running of their office, their travel, the work they do on behalf of the monarchy and on behalf of the British government and the nation. And that is very separate from any personal money they have, which will come down from bequests from family members or things like that. But again, I don't think it's as much as people think it is. And for people like Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, and I think this has been their fundamental problem, they've always kind of run with a real kind of fast billionaire set, and they've always longed for that sort of lifestyle themselves, which has led them down a road which has seen them become involved in really, very questionable, some might say utterly dodgy business deals. It's why they've had to go out and earn a living. And I think that has been their fundamental mistake and their fundamental flaw.
Interesting. I hope that answers your question, Annette. Meanwhile, Feather Duster has a question about Richard Eden, which I am dying to ask. Regular viewers will know Richard is the Daily Mail newspaper's diary editor. The question is, love your show, but I have a question. What does a diary editor do? Is this from one of your daughters?
Moan about not getting his lunch, as far as I know.
Yeah,
most days.
Come on.
The diary,
this is like a job interview now.
The diary is the social diary, and some other papers might call it the gossip column. But we call it a diary because it's based around events. We attend parties, we go to things. And that's essentially what it is.
That's not a job, is it?
It's extremely hard.
You get paid for that.
We have to get stories from these events, and interesting ones at that.
And they are interesting. It's always a delight, your page. If you want to know more about Richard in general, his hopes, his dreams, his lunch plans, we're always furnished with those, do check out our special Q&A with him that we put out earlier this week. That will play straight after this. Now, from time to time, we get comments about our beautiful decor, but this one from Reese Roses really caught our eye. She writes, "Thank you for Palace Confidential's weekly analysis videos. I like the beautiful blue rug that you have in the studio. Showed a screenshot of it to the carpet shop assistant, and he helped us find a very similar style for our living room. Anyone else out there like one of these rugs? If you do, let us know. We'll put a link to how to buy one in the information box." Right. Let's get back to the real deal now, the discussion, as we still have lots to get through, including the latest twist in the Prince Andrew and Fergie saga and news of a royal flying to a war zone. Before then, though, another eyebrow-raising intervention from Prince Harry's camp as briefings fly around about his recent cup of tea with his father, King Charles. Now, there's been lots said about this, and it's all getting a bit complicated for me. We're going to break it down as it happened, and then I want to get your thoughts on it. Now, Rebecca, this started with a piece in The Sun, didn't it? What was said?
This week's development started with a piece of The Sun. I mean, it feels like the original stuff 2 weeks ago feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? So, The Sun ran a piece on Saturday, which effectively, and this is me paraphrasing it, suggested like a bit of a whinge from Harry and Harry's camp. They were complaining how kind of perfunctory his cup of tea with the king was. It seemed like a bit of just another official meeting squeezed in amongst a number of other official meetings, and sounded a bit begrudging about it all.
Right.
Interestingly, they also said, and clearly their source was well plumbed in enough to also know, that Harry gave his father a photograph as part of this meeting as a gift, and he received a 41st birthday gift in return for his father. There was a little bit of a kerfuffle about what that picture was. The article said it was a family picture that featured him and Meghan, and Harry's PR team quite inexplicably felt they needed to explain this and say that it didn't have them in it. It actually didn't feature them, which I think most of us now assume it was probably of the children, of the grandchildren, because it'll be the first time he's seen them in a long time.
Quite.
But it was a particularly out of the blue and pithy interview, and it prompted, again, quite an extraordinary public response from Harry's people, who had been told of the article in advance apparently and been given a chance to comment on it, and they chose not to say that they felt this was mischief making by people who clearly had no interest in seeing Harry reconcile with his father.
And
he was quite angry.
So then, Richard, then the Mail on Sunday ran with some extraordinary claims from Harry's side.
Yes, I mean, this went even further than that original response from Prince Harry, which I would say was quite extraordinary anyway.
Yeah.
But what the sources close to Harry and Meghan were saying was they were blaming the sort of men in grey suits, which is a phrase that we've heard many times. It was a phrase which I think Diana first used, and it's a theme which was explored at length in Prince Harry's memoirs Spare, where all of the problems he saw it were caused by the officials. That's who he's referring to, these officials, these courtiers that surround the king, the monarch, and other members of the royal family.
So, and that's really echoes comments that his mother made, doesn't it?
Yeah, so he's essentially saying that their people around the king, around his father, are trying to jeopardise his chances of a reconciliation. And it makes me a bit uneasy because it brings back memories of Princess Diana at her most sort of vulnerable when, even as Prince William has said, she became paranoid in part because she was being fed lies by Martin Bashir of BBC's Panorama to try to encourage her to do his big interview with her.
It's crazy, isn't it? Rebecca, you've looked into it and found that, funnily enough, there are those at the palace who are somewhat bemused by this turn of events.
Yeah, I think bemused was a polite way of putting it, and not a little frustrated. And what I think was very interesting is people I spoke to said, look, the king does consider his relationship with Prince Harry as an important one. Of course he does. He's a father and he's his son. And the officials behind the scenes are working to see how they can help the desire to repair that. But if every time something like a meeting happens between them and we see week upon week of leaks and briefings by Harry's side as a result of it, this is not going to help matters, and you could sense their frustration in there. And if you can indulge me for one sec, I would like to add, I've seen quite a lot of commentary, particularly on social media, a lot of keyboard warriors being quite negative at the king about this and calling him, a weak man for having this meeting. And I've spoken to a lot of people in the know about this, and they all say to me, look, is the king hurt and angry at the way Harry has behaved? Of course he is. Is he wary? Is he cautious about how they are going to move forward? Absolutely, and he will continue to be cautious. And as I said, what's happened subsequently has only emphasised why he does need to be cautious. But he is also a man of 76 who's faced, a life-threatening condition and is still dealing with it, and he's also a father. And I kind of think, I try to put myself in his shoes as a mother. Is there anything my child could do or say that would harden my resolve never to speak to them again? Do you know, honestly, Joe, Richard, that would break me.
Yeah.
That would absolutely break me. I'd love to think there was nothing that would completely break that bond.
Most people would agree with
I think
you.
siblings are very different, but I think, as a parent, you look at these things differently. But it doesn't mean he's not going to be cautious, and it doesn't mean he's not going to be wary. It doesn't mean he's going to let him in and say, help yourself to the family silver, come round for, lunch whenever you want. It is slowly and cautiously.
Well, I'm going to add my 2 pence, and it strikes me sometimes that Harry sits there and gets quite pleased every time there's something to be slightly annoyed about.
Yeah, I can't
It's
even
just
begin to put myself in his thought process and in his head. But there is a feeling amongst, certainly in the royal circles that I speak to, that, there seems to be maybe a slight pleasure in, when things go wrong, because it's like, see, I proved you. No one wants to make this work, and that it makes him out to be that permanent victim again.
And you've written a column today, haven't you, Richard, about Harry and these plots and conspiracies that he sees everywhere?
Yes, well, I'd written last week about the plot, as I described it, to bring Harry and Meghan back. And that was in the sense that you got all the people around Harry and Meghan, their friends, advisors, all trying to sort of manoeuvre them back into British life, aided by some around the king. And I've also heard there's people in the government. We have a Labour government, and there's people there that that were very grateful when Meghan married into the royal family. They saw her as a great symbol of change and modernisation.
Yeah.
And they're very keen for Harry and Meghan to be back involved again. But then, and alternatively, you've got Prince Harry making all these claims himself. So it is very tricky trying to find out exactly what's true, and that's what I've done in my piece.
And Rebecca, we know that what Harry thinks of these courtiers, or these famous men in grey suits, but they're unlikely to ever speak publicly. But a lot of people might argue that they're not only sort of like trying to protect the king, but the monarchy as an institution.
Absolutely, and they're protecting it from someone who has made it their raison d'etre for the last few years to attack it at every turn, which I've always never understood, and I think it's very misguided that, you know, someone who's born and brought up in that institution see the good it does. It's not perfect, they don't always get it right, but ultimately I would argue it is a force for good in this country and throughout the world and in the Commonwealth. You know, and I think they do feel they have to protect it from him. And I would also point out that, yes, the courtiers and the officials, you know, the private secretaries, the personal household do wield great power within the makeup of the royal household and the institution, but ultimately they're not the people who make the decisions.
Well, it's kind of insulting to the reigning monarch, isn't it, to say, oh, you know, they're just being manipulated by all these men in grey suits.
Exactly. You know, the king is quite capable of making a decision off his own back. He will listen to their advice, and they might say, look, sir, you've got this scenario, this scenario, this scenario. If this goes right, that might be what happened. If this goes wrong, we have to be aware of this. But he is a man who has spent his whole lifetime working within this setup. And, you know, he said before he became king, look, I know sometimes people think I've meddled, I've forced my hand as Prince of Wales, but I know what my role is as monarch. And I do think he is absolutely stuck to that. So I think give the king some credit for a man who can make up his own mind at the end of the day.
And I have to say that Prince Harry was not complaining about these so-called men in grey suits when they were helping him. I mean, to give you one example, it was these men who came up with the idea of the Invictus Games.
Right.
They suggested it to Harry as a project that he could sink his teeth into after leaving, the armed forces, and he took up that. But it was them who suggested it, and he was grateful for that.
I think I just can't help coming back to the thing that, you know, if the king and Harry can't even have a cup of tea, whether it's formal and perfunctory or informal, without it sort of ending up with every detail leaked all over the press, what hope is there of actually repairing this relationship?
Yeah, I mean, that's a key point. If Harry does want this reconciliation, he has to relax a bit and not get upset if a story appears. Look, this story that appeared in The Sun, you know, would have been, they might have heard different things from different people and put it together. But this idea that there's, you know, officials briefing against him, I really don't think is the case. And he just needs to relax a bit and not fly off the handle giving out statements after any story.
Well, let's move on to another big irritation for poor King Charles, and then fresh unpleasant revelations about Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, over her friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, we discussed this at length last week with Andrew Loney, who has written a book on Andrew and Fergie, so you can check that show out if you missed it. Since then, we've heard that they are to be uninvited at Christmas. I mean, not the biggest surprise, is it, Rebecca? But what can you tell us? Are we really bound to see less of them now?
I think it's worth clarifying, because my understanding is it's quite difficult for the king to say, you're not invited to the family Christmas. Okay, he's head of the household. Andrew is still a member of their family, you know, a brother and uncle, whether they like it or not. It's quite difficult. And also, you know, the king is head of the Church of England and he's a Christian man, and, it's not his instinct to be nasty. But what they have let be known is it would be really majorly helpful to them if Andrew decided to recuse himself from Christmas and other festivities.
One gets the impression that Andrew still needs that pointed out.
I think he does. And sometimes the pages of newspapers are the way to do it, because I think the private entreaties don't always, fall on receptive ears. So I think what he's saying is, do what you did last year over your other scandal, which was the whole Chinese alleged spy issue, and just not be seen for a bit. Whether that happens is another case, because Andrew has a habit of popping up like a bad smell where he's not wanted. So let's see.
Whew. Well, and Richard, it's all bad news. There's reports that Fergie could lose an honorary title.
Yes, this is the freedom of the city of York. Obviously, she is still Sarah, Duchess of York.
Yeah.
But Prince Andrew lost the same title himself after his scandals. And I think they're going to have a vote on this at the council in York to strip her of this. So that would be, I mean, she's lost, I think it's 8 charity patronages at the latest count. So this will be the last. I have to say though, since last week, I've been speaking to friends of Sarah's, friends of the family, who have been very sympathetic. They've been sticking by her. They think that she was very hard done by, because this email that was leaked from 2011, that was when essentially she was sort of sucking up to Jeffrey Epstein, after she had publicly disowned him.
Her supreme friend.
Was because she was threatened very much so by him.
Right.
And he was a dangerous, very powerful man. So she was sort of trying to protect her family. So there is a lot of sympathy from their good friends, I have to say.
We've talked in the past, haven't we, Rebecca, about, particularly in the wake of Prince Philip passing, that there's been a sort of like a thawing or like a welcoming of Fergie back into the fold. We've seen her at more events and things like that. But has that goodwill gone, do you think, now? Or what can Sarah do now?
It's difficult to say. I mean, that thaw did start with the late Queen Elizabeth, who said, look, you can come up to Balmoral, but just don't even think about setting foot on the estate while my husband's here, because he will not tolerate that.
Right.
But, she could come up when Prince Philip had gone, and, she wasn't allowed within the castle, but, on Craigavon Lodge, which was slightly away from it, and also, onto the fringes of the Sandringham estate at Christmas. So it did start with the Queen, and I think the King's continued that, particularly given her health problems. She's obviously had cancer twice in the last couple of years, both breast and skin cancer, and I know they were appreciative of when the whole Epstein issue kicked off again a few years ago, of persuading Andrew not to be seen at church on Christmas Day. So I think they were appreciative of that. But I do think this is testing their patience. I think it's very interesting they've chosen not to comment on the recent developments privately or publicly. I think they're probably biding their time and waiting to see how this all plays out. But it is putting the King definitely in a very invidious position, and I suspect trying his patience somewhat.
Christmas is not that far away now, frighteningly enough. Now, we've talked before, Richard, about the potential future roles for Beatrice and Eugenie in this, this challenge of a slimmed-down monarchy. But what does this mean for them?
Well, it's not helpful, certainly, and I think, I've always hoped that they would have some sort of formal role, but I think it's fair to say that's less likely now. But I was writing about Princess Beatrice today, that she's, still, she's doing very well with a company that she has giving advice. So there are people who see her as a useful source of advice with her company. And I think generally she's seen as very sensible. So, I'm hoping that when all the sort of scandal involving the parents passes, they'll still be seen as potential useful members of the family that Prince William can lean on in the future.
Yeah, this is a little bit random. We also saw a rather unexpected interview with Sarah's publicist.
Yes, this is the Duchess of York's longtime publicist, James Henderson, who's given an interview himself and about the difficulties he's had.
Why?
I think it's because he's had to speak publicly about Sarah's troubles over recent weeks, so he obviously thought that he should speak about his own.
And he made the point that he had one phone call from Epstein, didn't he? And he said he was an incredibly menacing and nasty man who sort of basically, I'm going to blow your lives up because of this whole Sarah going public and calling him the P word.
Yeah, I think when it came to
all-round great guy, old Jeffrey.
When it came to the threats to the family, I think he was on the real sharp end of those. So I think he's wanted to make that point.
He was. It's still a surprising issue. If you're a publicist, you don't tend to want to become the story, I have to say.
No,
But
yeah.
he
Anyway,
obviously felt there'd be some good to come from it.
let's move on to good. Hear that? That's right, it's time to celebrate an unsung royal hero of the week. And well, Richard let the cat out of the bag a bit earlier because it's about another royal who's gone to Ukraine. Rebecca, tell us more.
I think it's really good. We're back to the person who inspired this segment from the
Yes.
start. The Princess Royal, Princess Anne, as she's more commonly known.
She's not unsung on this programme, but anyway.
She's
yeah.
not, but I think it's definitely worth highlighting this week. At the age of 75, now she's probably got more energy at 75 than, I've got in my
Definitely more than me.
tired body.
Yeah.
But she's gone to Ukraine at the request of the British government. She spent the day there in Kiev on the beginning of the week. She met with President Zelensky, and actually I noticed, and the palace haven't commented on this, but President Zelensky was carrying a very familiar envelope to me, one of the palace envelopes with the King's cipher on the back. So I think she gave him a personal letter from the King.
Oh,
That's
lovely.
my suspicion.
Yeah.
And she had a meeting with him. She also was there very much, I think, with her previous experience with a lot of children's charities over the years. And she was there she lay a teddy bear at a memorial for the youngest victims of the conflict since the Russian invasion started. And she was speaking to a lot of people who are working to help rescue Ukrainian children who have either been kidnapped by the Russian forces or are living in Russian-occupied territory to be reunited with their family. So a really strong, powerful visit. She packed a lot into one day, and I think it's truly remarkable. I don't want to be patronising to say at her age, because she's a remarkable woman, but it is a conflict zone.
Yeah.
And I have friends with family throughout Ukraine who are daily impacted by the effect of the war. So I think it's a really laudable move for her to go there.
I think it was particularly poignant that teddy she left was one of her daughter Zara's from when she was a child. So
Right.
Zara had obviously wanted to hand that over at the memorial
Lovely
to
touch,
children
yeah.
that have been murdered.
Yeah.
Well, we've seen Sophie visit Ukraine, and then Prince Harry has made a private visit there. And we've heard that William wants to go, but how likely is that?
I wouldn't rule it out, but obviously as heir to the throne, it's slightly more tricky for him from a security perspective. Obviously, it would, if anything were to happen while he was there, that would be considered a massive victory by the Russian authorities. But I know he's really keen, and he's always felt very frustrated at not being able to go to an active war zone, for example, as a future king. And obviously he is trying to do his bit. Ukraine is something he's spoken about at length. I was with him in Estonia earlier on this year when he was visiting, British troops who are there literally miles away from the border with Russia. So he's pushing it that little bit more. I wouldn't entirely rule it out, and I'm not saying that from a position of knowledge that I know something's going to happen. I just know the way he's thinking.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure the time is quite right yet.
Interesting. Well, whenever we do discuss places that the royals are visiting, we often hear from people in those areas. So are any of you watching from Ukraine or maybe nearby in Eastern Europe? We'd love to know, so do let us know in the comments. We love hearing from you. Right, well, it's not always easy and not possible for the more senior members of the family, as Rebecca was just saying, but as we've just discussed, the royals do sometimes find themselves in conflict zones. Here are some of the most powerful pictures of them there. That is impressive stuff. Now, a reminder that we do these great montages every week, and the best way to never miss them is by subscribing to our YouTube channel. So what are you waiting for? Up next, our very own Richard Eden reveals his royal secret. You can click here for that. Just time to say thank you to him and Rebecca and to you for watching, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.